One of the things we rarely talk about when asked questions is your own relationship, your personal relationship with either your wife or your husband or a child, and what influence do they have on you? Well, I married Suzanne in 1969, and we were not high school sweethearts, but we knew each other in high school. Suzanne's brother, Frank, was a very good friend of mine, and Suzanne came from a different environment. Her family are Assyrians. Her parents were born in the Middle East, and when they came to the United States, they came for the American dream, but also to get away from an oppressive society. So they had a perspective growing up, her parents did, of the way children and the way interactions work and how people, what they're responsible for. So when I met Suzanne, I had, frankly, a lot of bad habits. I wasn't very good with money. I was quick to buy things on credit. I didn't pay for a lot of things. I was very, very knee-jerk in terms of my reaction to things. I wasn't as thoughtful as I realized I could have been. And Suzanne brought a stability to our relationship, ultimately to me, that allowed me to see the view of the world in different ways. Because generally you have only yourself and your parents to give you, and your peers, obviously, to give you that view. But she was a very calming force in my life. And as a result, she was as much responsible for taking me down the path I went to, with just a couple of very, very short but very impactful moments. The first moment was our actual marriage and the way we were going to live, and my ability to be more responsible, and my ability to understand economics and to understand decision making and how it affected not only me, which is all I had to worry about in the beginning, but how it affected us, which became an issue. But secondarily, I was a track coach almost my entire life, up until the time I had gone to Kansas State. And our director of athletics at Kansas State, who was a very, very important person to me, retired or resigned or was fired. And Suzanne said to me, "Why don't you become director of athletics?" And I said, "Don't be ridiculous. I saw my life and my career in this single silo of activity. And what it was is I was a coach. I didn't take any academic business classes. I didn't know about contracts. I was a relatively good public speaker, but didn't have all the other skills necessary. I had never been in a leadership role with adults. I'd been in a leadership role with young people. So I told Suzanne, that's ridiculous. It's impossible. It can't be done." And a lot of that had to do with my own lack of self-image, my own lack of how my abilities translated into this other field. Well, sure enough, with her prodding, I applied and became director of athletics. And my entire career in life was on a different trajectory. So even though I don't talk about her very often, and even though, we don't, we generally, when we're asked questions, they're about our, what we accomplished or what we did, or how did you get there, and how are you motivated, et cetera, et cetera. But what we don't talk about often enough are those people around us that motivate and stimulate us, especially when you're in a leadership role and people believe that you got there through some magical potion, or you had some skill set that was different than other people. And the truth is that's not the case. The case is you have skill sets, we all do, but how do you hone those skill sets? How do you make those skill sets applicable across a horizontal field as opposed to only a vertical field? And Suzanne gave me that insight and talked about opening up my world, which she did. And she did it from a from a place where her upbringing was not a global upbringing. Her upbringing was very focused. She lived in a family that was very, very educated, very educational oriented, et cetera, but she brought stability, she brought possibility, and she brought the fact that the world is large and your skill sets apply in a variety of places. And in essence, she had more faith in me than I had in myself, which was another lesson that I learned, because what I needed to do as part of my coaching was to get the young men and women I dealt with to see the world, and more importantly, themselves, in a different light. They needed to understand that they could be not everything they wanted, but a lot more than they thought going in. So her relationship and our relationship was tantamount to the success and the direction of my life. And without it, I would never have achieved the goals that I achieved outside of coaching, in business, in leadership roles, in other roles. And I don't think she or a significant other or a great friend get the kind of recognition and or the kind of play they need. The last point I'll make is, in the last several interviews, and I saw Manny Batistas and Danny Aldridge and Jim Warwick and so forth, and even Jani Ruta Johnson. I watched those interviews with a great deal of interest. And yes, my name came up. And I know the objective of this in the very beginning was, a look into my life and my connection to the athletes that I dealt with and their connection to each other. But what I've seen as of late, which makes me very happy and brings me a lot of joy, is those athletes bringing into focus those people that affected them beyond what we did at Cal Poly, how they got there, what their legacies are, what their fears were, what their relationships were. And we were a part of that. We were maybe a significant part of it, but they all had other lives. They all had other things going on. And in order for them to internalize what we were trying to do as coaches and athletes, they had to have a broader view of the way things worked. And that view was enhanced, sometimes goaded and promoted by other people. And then you begin to recognize what your legacy is. And while I and the team played a part in that, the truth is, you, the athlete, the person who was coached, they internalized it, they lived with it, they made subtle changes to it, and then the beauty is they gave it back. And they gave it back to a whole bunch of young people who didn't know anything about how they got there, and learned the lessons from the Cal Poly issue, but learned it through a different vehicle. And that vehicle was not me. I was a subset of that vehicle, and that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is we treat children, we treat friends, we treat lovers, we treat significant others in a way that we learned. And that learning has been passed on, and there's other learnings going on. And eventually the Cal Poly moment will dissipate, and the next great coach or the next great teacher or the next admired person hopefully will be someone from our program or another program that did the same thing. So I have been fascinated with, and frankly love, the things that people have said about what we accomplished, but I have become more enamored with their conversations about those things related to it and how they got there. Danny Aldridge with his mother, Batista Manny with his family, all very interesting. Jani, was not a product of our program. She was in it for a while, but she had laid the foundation in other ways, and she has gone on to do some great things with Jan. So I think it's a fantastic issue for me to be able to say that I had some people in my life that really guided me in a way that I would not have been guided otherwise. And I would not have been one of those people that wanted to be browbeaten into submission. You had to convince me subtly that you could do more, you can see more, and you could be of more import. And I think that's been great. And a lot of that is due to my relationship with Suzanne. and then ultimately my relationship with the athletes and the people I've been around. So there are significant others in my life that may not have known that they had that impact, but they clearly did. And all I can say again is that as much as I taught, I learned more.